The Lean Startup by Ries. Reading chapter 7, Measure. Subtopic, Kanban or Kanban. Following the lean manufacturing principles of Kanban or capacity constraint, Grockit changed the product prioritization process. Under the new system, user stories were not considered complete until they led to validated learning. Thus, stories could be cataloged as being in one of four states of development: in the product backlog, actively being built, done, or in the process of being validated. Validated was being defined as knowing whether the story was a good idea to have been done in the first place. This validation usually would come in the form of split test showing a change in customer behavior, but also might include customer interviews or surveys. The Kanban rule permitted only so many stories in each of the four states. As stories flow from one state to the other, the bucket fills up. Once a bucket becomes full, it cannot accept more stories. Only when a story has been validated can it be removed from the Kanban board. If the validation fails and it turns out that the story is a bad idea, the relevant feature is removed from the product. I wish I could show the diagram. Kanban diagram of work as it progresses from stage to stage. No bucket can contain more than 3 projects at a time. It's not bad, but I can't, so I'll continue reading. If you want to buy the book, the link is in the description, by the way. I have implemented this system with several teams. The initial result is always frustrating. Each bucket fills up, starting with the validated bucket, and moves on to done bucket until it's not possible to start any more work. Teams that are used to measuring their productivity narrowly by the number of stories they are delivering feel stuck. The only way to start work on new features is to investigate some of the stories that are done but haven't been validated. That often requires non engineering efforts, talking to customers, looking at split test data, and the like. Pretty soon, everyone gets a hang of it. This progress occurs in fits and starts at the first. Engineering may finish a big patch of work, followed by extensive testing and validation. As engineers look for ways to increase their productivity, they start to realize that if they include the validation exercise from the beginning, the whole team can be more productive. For example, why build a new feature that is not part of a split test experiment? It may save you time in the short run, but it will take more time later to test during the validation phase. The same logic applies to a story that an engineer doesn't understand. Under the old system, he or she would just build it and find out later what it was for. In the new system, that behavior is clearly counterproductive. Without a clear hypothesis, how can a story be validated? We saw this behavior at IMBU too. I once saw a engineer face down a senior executive over a relatively minor change. The engineer insisted that the new feature be split tested, just like any other. His peers backed him up. It was considered absolutely obvious that all features should be routinely tested, no matter who are commissioning them. Embarrassingly, all too often, I was the executive in question. A solid process lays the foundation for a healthy culture, one where ideas are evaluated by merit and not by job title. Most important, teams working in this system begin to measure their productivity according to validated learning, not in terms of the production of a new feature. Hypothesis testing at Grockit. When Grockit made this transition, the results were dramatic. In one case, they decided to test one of the major features called lazy registration to see if it was worth the heavy test investment they were making ongoing support. They were confident in this design because lazy registration is considered one of the design best practices for online services. In this system, customers do not have to register for a service upfront. Instead, they immediately begin using the service and are asked to register only after they have a chance to experiment the service's benefit. For a student, lazy registration works like this. When you come to Grockit website, you are immediately placed in a study session with other students working on the same test. You don't have to give your name, email address, or credit card number. There is nothing to prevent you from jumping in and getting started immediately. For Grockit, this was essential to testing one of its core assumptions that customer would be willing to adopt this new way of learning only if it could see proof that it was working early on. As a result of this hypothesis, Grockit's design required that it manage three classes of users: unregistered guests, registered guests, and customers who are paid for premium version of the product. This design required significant extra work to build and maintain. The more classes of users there are, the more work is required to keep track of them, and the more marketing effort is required to create the right incentives to entice customers to upgrade to the next class. Grockit had undertaken this extra effort because lazy registration was considered an industry best practice. I encouraged the team to try a simple split test. They took one cohort of customers and required that they registered immediately based on nothing more than Grocket's marketing materials. To their surprise, this cohort behavior was exactly same as that of the lazy registration group. They had the same rate of registration, activation, and subsequent retention. In other words, the extra effort of lazy registration was a completely waste, even though it was considered an industry best practice. Even more important than reducing waste was the insight that this test suggested. Customers were basing their decision about Grockit on something other than the use of the product. Think about this. Think about the cohort of customers who were required to register for the product before entering a study session with other students. They had very little information about the product, nothing more that was presented on Grocket's homepage and customer registration page. By contrast, the lazy registration group had a tremendous amount of information about the product because they had used it. Yet, despite this information disparity, customer behavior was exactly the same. This suggested that improving Grocket's positioning and market might have more significant impact on attracting new customers than would adding new features. This was just the first of the most important experiment Grockit was able to run. Since those early days, they have expanded their customer base dramatically. They now offer test prep for numerous standardized tests, including GMAT, SAT, ACT, and GRE, as well as online math and English courses for students in 7th to 12th grade. Grockit continues to evolve its process, seeking continuous improvement at every turn. With more than 20 employees in San Francisco office, Grockit continues to operate with the same deliberate, disciplined approach that has been their hallmark all along. They have helped close to 1 million students and are sure to help millions more. The value of three A's. These examples from Grockit demonstrate each of the three A's of metrics: actionable, accessible, auditable. Actionable. For a product to be considered actionable, it must demonstrate clear cause and effect. Otherwise, it is just vanity metric. The report that Grockit's team began to use to judge their learning milestone made it extremely clear what actions would be necessary to replicate the results. By contrast, vanity metrics fail this criterion. Take the number of hits to a company website. Let's say we have 40,000 hits this month, a new record. Where do we need to do? What do we need to do to get more hits? Well, that depends. Where are the new hits coming from? Is it from 40,000 new customers or from one guy with an extremely active web browser? Are the hits the result of a new marketing campaign or a PR push? What is it? What is a hit, anyways? Does each page of the browser count as one hit, or do all the embedded images and multimedia count as well? Those who have sat in a meeting debating the unit of measurement in a report will recognize the problem. Vanity metrics wreak havoc because they prey on a weakness of the human mind. In my mind, when the numbers go up, the people think the improvement was caused by their actions, by whatever they were working on at that time. This is why it's common to have a meeting in which marketing thinks the numbers went up because of the new PR or marketing effort, and engineering thinks the better numbers are a result of new features added. Finding out what is actually going on is extremely costly, and so most managers simply move on, doing best they can to form their own judgment on the basis of their experience and the collective intelligence in the room. Unfortunately, when the numbers go down, it results in a very different reaction. Now it's somebody's fault. Thus, most team members or departments live in a world where the department is constantly making things better, only to have their hard work sabotaged by other departments that just don't get it. Is it any wonder these departments develop their own distinct language, jargon, culture, defense mechanisms against the bozos working down the hall? Actionable metrics are the antidote to this problem. When cause and effect is clearly understood, people are better able to learn from their actions. Human beings are innately talented learners when given a clear and objective assessment. Accessible. All too many reports are not understood by the employees and managers who are supposed to use them to guide their decision making. Unfortunately, most managers do not respond to the complexity of by working hard in hand with the data warehousing team to simplify the report so that they can understand them better. Departments too often spend their energy learning how to use data to get what they want rather than a genuine feedback to guide their future actions. This is an antidote to this misuse of data. First, make the reports as simple as possible so that everyone understands them. Remember the saying, metrics are people too. The easiest way to make reports comprehensible is to use tangible concrete units. What is a website hit? Nobody is really sure, but everyone knows what a person visiting the website is. One can practically picture those people sitting on their computers. This is why cohort-based reports are the gold standard of learning metrics. They turn complex actions into people-based reports. Each cohort analysis says, among the people who used our product in this period, here's how many of them exhibited each of the behaviors we care about. In the IMView example, we saw 4 behaviors: downloading the product, logging into the product from one's computer, engaging in a chat with other customers, and upgrading to a paid version of the product. In other words, the reports deal with people and their actions, which are far more useful than piles of data points. For example, think about how hard it would have been to tell if IMBU was being successful if we had reported only on the total number of person-to-person conversations. Let's say we have 10,000 conversations in a period. Is that good? Is that one person being very, very social, or is it 10,000 people trying to use a product one at a time and then giving up? There's no way to know without creating a detailed report. As the gross numbers get larger, accessibility becomes more and more important. It is hard to visualize what it means if the number of website hits goes down from 250,000 in one month to 200,000 the next month. But most people understand immediately that what it means to lose 50,000 customers. That's practically a whole stadium full of people who are abandoning the product. Accessibility also refers to widespread access to the report. Grockit did this especially well. Every day, their system automatically generated a document containing the latest data for every single one of the split test experiments and other leap of faith metrics. This document was mailed to every employee of the company. They all had a fresh copy of the email in their inboxes. The reports were well laid out and easy to read with each experiment, and its results explained in plain English. Another way to make reports accessible is to use a technique we developed at IMVU. Instead of housing the analysis or data in a separate system, our reporting data and its infrastructure were considered part of the product itself, were owned by the product development team. The reports were available on our website, accessible to anyone with an employee account. Each employee could log in to the system at any time, choose from a list of all current and past experiments, and see a simple one-page summary of the results. Over time, those one-page summaries became the de facto standard for settling product arguments throughout the organization. When people needed evidence to support something they had learned, they would bring a printout with them to the relevant meeting, confident that everyone they showed it to would understand its meaning. Auditable. When informed that their pet project is a failure, most of us be tempted to blame the messenger, the data, the manager, the gods, or anything else we can think of. That's why the third A of a good metric is auditable is essential. We must ensure that the data is credible to employees. The employees at IMView would brandish one-page reports to demonstrate what they had learned to settle arguments, but the process wasn't so smooth. Most of the time, when a manager developer or team was confronted with results that would kill a pet project, the loser of the argument would challenge the veracity of the data. Such challenges were common than most managers would admit, and unfortunately, most data reporting systems are not designed to answer them successfully. Sometimes this is a result of well intentioned but misplaced desire to protect the privacy of customers. More often, the lack of such report supporting documents is simply a matter of neglect. Most data reporting systems are not built by product development teams whose job is to prioritize and build product features. They are built by business managers and analysts. Managers who must use these systems only to check to see if the reports are mutually consistent. They all too often lack a way to test if the data is consistent with reality. The solution? First, remember that metrics are people too. We need to be able to test the data by hand in a messy real world by talking to customers. That is the only way to be able to check if the reports contain true facts. Managers need the ability to spot check the data with real customers. It also has a second benefit. System that provides this level of auditability give managers and entrepreneurs the opportunity to gain insights into why customers are behaving the way the data indicate. Second, those building reports must make sure the mechanism that generates a report are not too complex. Whenever people reports shown should be drawn directly from master data rather than from immediate intermediate system, which reduces opportunities for error. I have noticed that every time a team has one of its judgments or assumptions overturned as a result of technical problem with the data, its confidence, morale, and discipline are undermined. When we watch entrepreneurs succeed in the myth making world of Hollywood, books, and magazines, the story is always structured the same way. First, we see the plucky protagonist having an epiphany, hatching a new idea. We learn about his or her character and personality, how he or she came to be in the right place at the right time, and how he or she took the leap of faith to start a business. Then the photo montage begins. It's usually short, just a few minutes of time lapse photography or narrative. We see the protagonist building a team, Maybe working in a lab, writing on whiteboards, closing sales, pounding on keyboards. At the end of the montage, the founders are successful and the story can move on to more interesting fare. How to split the spoils of their success, who will appear on magazine covers, who sues whom, and implications for the future. Unfortunately, the real work that determines the success of startups happens during the photo montage. It doesn't make the cut in terms of a big story because it's too boring. Only 5% of entrepreneurship is a big idea: the business model, the whiteboard strategizing, the splitting up of the spoils. The other 95% is a gritty work that is a measure of innovation, accounting, product prioritization decisions, deciding which customers to target or listen to, and having the courage to subject a grand vision to constant testing and feedback. One decision stands out above all other as the most difficult, the most time consuming, and the biggest source of waste for startups. We all must face this fundamental test: deciding when to pivot and when to persevere. To understand what happens during the photo montage, we have to understand how to pivot, and that is the subject of chapter 8. Thank you for listening to the Lean Startup. If you want to buy this book, the link is in the description.